Heard the same resolution. So if these people are having their positions paid for through the federal government as well as their health benefits, that means they can't be involved in politicking at all. They can't be on the Union County Democratic Committee, they can't be working on your campaigns and such. So can you verify that? County Council, what do you do when an employee is found to be working on campaigns while getting paid through a federal grant? What's the consequences of that? I'm referring to the Hatch Act, the federal Hatch Act. How does that apply to county employees that are getting paid with federal funds and are involved with the Union County Democratic Committee politicking? Does the county monitor that at all? Do you have a...
Can I make a statement about that? And I know this because being involved in the Hatch Act a number of years ago. The legislation that provides the funding would say specifically whether the funding and the employees paid under the funding are subject to the Hatch Act. So not all federal funds immediately disqualify someone from participating, running for office, or what have you. So you'd have to look at the funding resolution itself and where the money is coming from, if it's coming from the federal government. I think like community development monies or exempt, there are other monies that aren't, but that it specifically says generally in the funding resolutions whether the funding makes a person subject to that.
Thank you. And that is a county resolution? So if I go for...
That comes, what I'm saying is the authorization that comes from the federal government would detail whether those employees and the salaries paid to those employees are subject to the Hatch Act or not.
So what would I owe from the county to get that information?
I think you would have to get it from the federal government. But that I don't know.
Okay, well I appreciate that answer. So my question to you is, how does the county monitor that you're in compliance with the federal Hatch Act? You must have some sort of paperwork on your ends. I mean, the federal government isn't here paying attention to what your employees are doing. I assume that you're responsible for that, in compliance with that. So
that's not correct either.
You're not responsible.
The county is not responsible, regardless of how someone's paid, the county is not responsible for someone's activities outside of their county employment, regardless of how they're paid. That's not the county's responsibility.
Even if you're accepting federal grants, there's no responsibility on the county's part to make sure you're in compliance with federal laws if you're getting federal money.
That's up to individual employees.
So I'll have to contact the FBI and ask them, give them a list of employees and ask them to investigate and ask them for direction on how I could look into that further, because you've just answered me that you've washed your hands of it, you have no responsibility in it, and catch us if you can, type of thing.
The FBI's
That's not what it said at all. Didn't say that.
Well, you're saying there's no compliance at the county level, you're putting the onus on the federal government. So I would have to contact the federal government and give them a list of these employees that they're covering and ask them to cross-reference it, or, I'm asking who's the grown-up in charge here. It's a lot of money.
It's up to you, Mrs. Allen.
So you're saying you have nothing to do with it? The federal Hatch Act, you accept federal funds, but you have no responsibility.
She's all right. She can answer a question.
Is this the 10th freeholder now?
What?
Is that the 10th freeholder now? My light is still on. I'm trying to get an answer. These are federal funds, millions of dollars. A lot of them are Homeland Security funds. And you have employees working on your campaigns. And I have friends that are federal employees. They're afraid to write letters to the editor in fear of their jobs. I mean, someone holds them accountable. So who holds county employees accountable for these federal funds? You're telling me you don't. So that's the answer.
Mrs. Renner, this is clearly a partisan issue.
Not a partisan issue. Just because you're all Democrat doesn't make it partisan. It's an accountability issue for tax dollars, for federal tax dollars. That's what it is. It's got nothing to do with partisanship. I am representing Tina Renner right here. I'm representing a taxpayer, and I'm asking you, what's your responsibility to the federal government for these funds that are just on your agenda tonight? You're telling me you have no responsibility. But it's fine that your employees work on campaigns and get paid through federal funds.
You can draw whatever conclusion you wish.
It's what you said.
No, it's not what
And
you
I
said.
have, well, I have it on film.
You can wish, you can say whatever you like. It's what
Well,
you
you
did.
said it. I
She's
have it
normally
on
right,
film.
though. You know what she's saying.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Anyone else wishing to speak, please come forward on resolutions.
I just want to go back to the question raised about the Hatch Act, and I can speak to this because I had a complaint about the Hatch Act filed against me a number of years ago when I was at Elizabeth Development Company. And just to say this, just because an employee is getting paid by federal funds does not automatically mean you are subject to the Hatch Act. It's very clear in the funding that provided, because I saw this, the documents themselves, and in those documents where the federal funds come from, it will tell you whether the funding for this is subject to the Hatch Act. And that goes down to the individual employee. The county is not responsible for telling the employees this, whether they can participate in political activities or not. And just because, even if you're subject for the Hatch Act, you can still hold elective office. You can run for a nonpartisan office, and you can run for an elected office. You can serve while you're an elected official. It only comes to when you're up for re-election, whether it's a partisan election or not, where the Hatch Act comes in. But it should be very clear. Just because there's federal funds involved doesn't mean you're subject to the Hatch Act and what that means in terms of political activities. So let's be clear about that.
Expand a little on Freeholder Sullivan's comments and to address some apparent misconceptions with reference to the Hatch Act. And the distinction that has to be drawn is the ability to participate in partisan campaigning and the ability to run for office. The Hatch Act does not in any way, shape, or form prohibit employees from engaging in political activity. It absolutely does not. Every employee is free to participate, even in partisan elections. The prohibition that applies to them running for office. And that only applies if, in fact, the source of funding for their particular salary is funds that have Hatch Act application, and subsequent to their involvement, if they seek to run for office, they would then be prohibited from running for office. But that is just in terms of being a candidate. So I know that at the beginning there was a speaker that specifically said that employees are prohibited from engaging in political activity. That is absolutely incorrect. That's it.